Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: President Trump is throwing Beijing an offer for a deal amid an escalating trade war. But if the regime doesn't take the bite and remove its revenge tariffs totaling more than 100% will take effect at midnight.
He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate.
The European Union scrambling to prevent China from diverting goods from the U.S. to Europe in the face of tariffs. Details on EU Commission head's phone call with China's premier. And what does the escalating rhetoric between the U.S. and China mean? Mike Sekora, founding director of the Socrates Project and the Reagan White House, breaks it down.
Their basic foundation is the exploitation of technology. The financial tools like tariffs and things like that are the things that support their technology maneuvering, their technology strategy.
President Trump calling Beijing's trade escalation a mistake. This comes after Beijing said it would fight to the end in response to Trump saying China would face a new total of over 100% tariffs starting Wednesday. That's unless the CCP removes its latest retaliation tariff against the U.S. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
I just spoke to the president about this, and he believes that China wants to make a deal with the United States. He believes China has to make a deal with the United States. It was a mistake for China to retaliate. The president, when America is punched, he punches back harder. That's why there will be 104% tariffs going into effect on China tonight at midnight. But the president believes that she and China want to make a deal. They just don't know how to get that started. And the president also wanted me to tell all of you that if China reaches out to make a deal, he'll be incredibly gracious, but he's going to do what's best for the American people.
The U.S. imposed sweeping tariffs on trading partners this week, a 10% baseline tariff for all countries and higher rates for the worst offenders. Over 70 countries so far have reached out to the U.S. to negotiate. At the time of this report, there have been no word from China yet, but the clock is ticking. The regime has until midnight, 12:01 on Wednesday, to remove its retaliatory tariff on U.S. goods. Trump gave his ultimatum Monday.
If that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed this to happen. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade, and it shouldn't be that way.
Combining that with tariffs imposed earlier this year and during Trump's first term, Chinese exports to the U.S. would face an over 100% tariff. Trump noted he has no plans to suspend tariffs during negotiations.
Would you be open to a pause in tariffs to allow for negotiations?
Well, we're not looking at that. We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent echoed Trump's message on Tuesday, calling China's escalation a big mistake. Here's why.
We are the deficit country. So what do we lose by the Chinese raising tariffs on us? We export 1/5 to them of what they export to us. So that is a losing hand for them.
America's largest trade deficit is with China. The total stood at almost $300 billion last year. Bessent added the U.S. has maximum negotiating leverage right now, and it'd be a mistake for anyone to think otherwise. He said that trading partners that have queued up and kept their cool will get priority in negotiations. The U.S. has decided to open trade talks with Japan. A post from Eric Trump seems to echo that point. Posting on X, Eric Trump wrote he wouldn't want to be the last country that tries to negotiate a trade deal with President Trump, saying that the first to negotiate will win, the last will absolutely lose. Over in Europe, the president of the European Commission is preparing for what could come next. Ursula von der Leyen called China's premier. The two talked about setting up a mechanism to track possible trade diversion. That's as the EU fears China will redirect cheap exports from the U.S. to Europe after Washington's tariffs on China take effect. It comes as the bloc prepares to negotiate with the White House. Here's more.
EU Trade Chief Maroš Šefčovič said Monday they're ready to negotiate a zero-for-zero deal with the Trump administration.
Well, the EU remains open to and strongly prefers negotiations. We will not wait endlessly.
The 27-member EU bloc is struggling with tariffs already in place on autos and metals. It also faces a 20% tariff on other products on Wednesday. And Trump has threatened to slap tariffs on alcoholic drinks from the EU. Investors and political leaders are still trying to figure out if Trump's tariffs are permanent or a pressure tactic to win concessions from other countries. And many investors are now betting that the growing risk of recession could prompt the U.S. Federal Reserve to cut rates as early as next month. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has so far indicated he is in no rush.
As tensions escalate, Washington and Beijing are ramping up the rhetoric, and that has Chinese-American businesses in California feeling stuck between a rock and a hard place. Let's dive in.
As U.S. President Donald Trump trades tariff threats with Beijing, Chinese-American business owners in California say they're feeling squeezed. And importer Taylor Chow says that pain will be passed on to the restaurants and retailers that he sells ingredients to.
Soy sauce, noodles, starch, this is a basic consumer product. Day to day, they use a lot and a large volume. But you put up that much tax on it, that will jet up the price a lot. Right now, the tax is 54%. Once we run out our inventory, definitely we're going to raise the price of 54%.
China, first row.
Those higher prices are coming soon, with U.S. reciprocal tariffs taking effect this week. Danny Huang owns a small grocery store lined with imported noodles, sauces, garlic, and ginger. He says he's getting ready to hike all their prices.
After this week, we might going to increase the price for those the products. I mean, those ingredients and the sauce. How much they pretend, how much will be, how much they're going to increase the price for us. The tariffs increase. And then will be like, we need to make up that percentage up there on the price.
And what does the escalating rhetoric between the U.S. and China mean for trade, national security, and shifting global dynamics? Joining us to discuss is Mike Sekora, founding director of the Socrates Project in the Reagan White House. Mike Sekora, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's always good to see you.
Now, the White House is confirming that the 104% tariffs on China are going to kick in at midnight tonight or early morning Wednesday. That's as the president has been calling out China in particular for unfair trade practices. Zooming out a bit, though, what do you see as the broader goal or objective of these tariffs?
Well, as Trump has stated, it's to get a level playing field, as much as I hate that term, but rather either going to zero tariffs across the board, or at least balance tariffs to a certain degree such that we're competing on what he would consider a level playing field.
Now, the press secretary today was saying that the president is saying that China has made a mistake by retaliating and that China needs a deal. What do you make of that? How do you read China's economic state right now?
It's not as bad as people think, and the idea that they need a deal, yeah, they do. But China deals from a technology strategy point of view. So where America's measuring things from financial, market size, what's the GNP and things like that, China's maneuvering from a technology perspective in terms of how can we increase our competitive advantage, i.e. make better products, better being excels at satisfying the customer needs better than the U.S. competitive products. As a result, China may, in a maneuvering way, give in certain respects, such that from a U.S. perspective, it looks like we've won, we've leveled the playing field in certain markets, so therefore we'll release it. But from a technology strategy point of view, China will be working to release those markets and reduce the tariffs where they have a true competitive advantage and keeping them in place where China does not have a competitive advantage. If you look at it, China has used the financial manipulation like tariffs, like subsidies, like tax breaks, all those things for years. And America looks at those as the basic tool they're using for a competitive advantage, but that's false. their basic foundation is the exploitation of technology. The financial tools like tariffs and things like that are the things that support their technology maneuvering, their technology strategy.
I want to zoom into that because part of the argument for these global tariffs, not just on, China and a select few countries, is to level that playing field, but also in terms of, say, national security, because there's a lot of talk about manufacturing and bringing that manufacturing back to the States, as we all saw and lived through COVID, what those interconnected supply chains meant for us here at home. How successful do you see these tariffs in bringing that manufacturing home, and is that what the focus should be here in terms of true national security?
Basically, you have to look at it from technology strategy point of view as what manufacturing we need to bring back, which will ultimately give us a competitive advantage and national security. Now, in a very broad sense, we don't produce a lot of the items which the military requires, okay? So we need to manufacture those, but we need to manufacture them such that they provide the warfighter a competitive advantage, which comes back to what technologies we're exploiting, developing, acquiring, and utilizing, which will produce those products that truly have a competitive advantage for the U.S. warfighter.
We have seen President Trump talking about, say, critical minerals, wanting to mine and refine them in the U.S., since right now the refining especially happens in China. In terms of, these global tariffs, could we see a shift in global dynamics or a global reset? What would that look like?
Well, a reset would be basically where it is a, quote, level playing field. But that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's level from a financial perspective. But as we know, the true competitive advantage, as Xi Jinping has stated openly and correctly and used for many, many decades, is the exploitation of the technology. So we can say financially it's level, but if they're maneuvering in the technology exploitation and using U.S. technology, both overtly and covertly, for a competitive advantage, where we're just looking at the finance, then it's not a level playing field. And what is a competitive advantage? Satisfying the customer needs better than the competitor's products satisfy the customer needs. That's all technology.
Definitely a lot to watch out for here, especially in terms of the markets and the consumer sentiment. But Mike Sekora, as always, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, a new effort to keep American data out of the Chinese Communist Party's hands. The National Institutes of Health just banned China from accessing sensitive research data. We have the details. Could EasyPass user data soon be exposed to Communist China? A lawmaker is questioning whether a company that's set to handle the tolls on the New Jersey Turnpike might be tied to Communist China. And the Chinese regime is trying to fix a disaster of its own making, a snowballing demographic crisis. But will stimulus measures work? We called residents inside China to find out. Meanwhile, once bustling streets have run empty inside China, as revealed on social media. What's happening behind the scenes? More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A new effort to keep American data out of the Chinese Communist Party's hands. The National Institutes of Health just banned China and several other countries from accessing sensitive research data that, if leaked, could threaten U.S. national security. The NIH announced Friday that the updated ban will apply to China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela. The U.S. considers all of them countries of concern. The change works in conjunction with an executive order signed by President Joe Biden last February. That measure prevents access to sensitive personal and government-related data. The sensitive data label applies to biometric identifiers, plus other health and financial details. The executive order warns that countries of concern can use artificial intelligence to analyze and manipulate bulk sensitive personal data and use it to commit espionage or develop advantages over the U.S. Any researcher who wants access to this information must pass an identification check and sign an agreement that states the data will not be used maliciously. A neuroscience researcher in the U.S. said that this ban will impact China's projects involving human genetics as part of their research, but the overall impact will be limited. On to transportation. If you use Easy Pass, listen up. A company that's set to handle the tolls on the New Jersey Turnpike might be tied to Communist China. That could spell trouble for customers, given the sensitive information loaded onto their transponders. And some lawmakers are voicing concerns. Our data reporter Kevin Hogan is looking into it.
This is a very big deal dollar-wise. That's a $1.7 billion bid that's been approved for TransCore to provide the tolling services for the New Jersey Turnpike. Now, there's a protest to that bid by another company that was not too happy about how they came in a little bit lower, but yet the New Jersey Turnpike Authority went with TransCore. So we're going to look further into this and see what is at stake. Now, that is millions of New Jerseyans and maybe others who may be transiting the New Jersey Turnpike. That's their address information, credit card information, their driver's licenses and their license plates. All of that information could be susceptible to falling into the wrong hands, and that's what New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer is raising the alarm about. We're going to see his quote right here. So he's saying that the Chinese Communist Party has made it abundantly clear that it is willing to leverage technology to undermine our national security and collect data on American citizens. This wouldn't be the first time if it does turn out to be the case. Think TikTok, think DeepSeek. Those are other avenues that the CCP uses to get information on Americans. Now, this company, TransCore, is a Tennessee-based company in the United States, but the problem is that its backstory is very convoluted, and it goes all the way to ST Engineering, which is a subsidiary of Temasek, which has ties to Singapore, and those Singaporean officials have ties to Chinese Communist Party officials. So that is the big concern there, how TransCore's data that it collects on these drivers could end up in the wrong hands with those CCP officials, right? Now, as you look further into this, you understand that this bid process is also shrouded in a lot of secrecy. Because again, we have a protest bid going by Conduent, and that is because TransCore's final bid, valued at $1.7 billion that we talked about, was selected even though Conduent could offer the same service for about $1.5 billion. So it came in lower, but yet they went with it. And also, the New Jersey Vindicator reports that TransCore's initial bid was even higher, over $2 billion. But the New Jersey Turnpike Authority met behind closed doors with the TransCore people, and then they came up with a $500 billion less bid, which was the final bid that they ultimately selected, right? Now, TransCore is no small company. It handles about 12% of all of the tolling in North America, and that's according to DI Market. So this company is not just some random company that came on the scene and got the bid for the construction of the tolling facilities in the New Jersey Turnpike. No, it is a very widespread company. I mean, it's up there with Siemens and a couple of these other companies. So it is very, very big. But this company has pushed back. TransCore says, no, these allegations are not the case, citing the fact that all of its products are made in the United States, and not only that, but that it's the only tolling services company that has all of its products made in the USA. And also, it has national security agreements with the Department of Justice and with the Department of the Treasury. We've reached out to both those agencies. The Department of Justice declined to comment, citing these confidentiality requirements, and the Treasury Department hasn't gotten back to us yet, but the Treasury Department oversees CFIUS, which is an agency that looks into foreign investment in American projects. So TransCore CEO Whit Hall is saying that the company checks out among all these government agencies with their security agreements, so it's pushing back on those claims. We'll have to let more details emerge as the story develops. And we'll let you know if the Treasury Department gets back to us.
How severe is China's demographic crisis? According to the latest official data released in January, China's population has entered its third year of decline, and the regime is trying to find ways to solve the problem. But are Chinese young people willing to cooperate? To understand public sentiment and learn more, we called locals in China's largest city, Shanghai. We distorted interviewees' voices for their safety.
The biggest problem we Chinese face now is that there's no one to carry on the next generation. Young people just don't want to have children. Neither of my two sons is willing to have kids. When I ask them what they'll do when they're old, they just say, "We'll figure it out when the time comes." This is no joke. The Chinese population is in sharp decline. It's a straight drop. And it's not just my sons. Basically all young people, well, maybe not 100%, but probably 3 out of 4, don't want to have children. And that's reasonable because they feel there's no hope for the future.
Huang said both of his sons are in their 30s. Many young people in China are being driven away from the idea of starting families due to heavy financial burdens and social pressure. That's on top of the high costs of raising a child in China. But low birth rate directly affects a country's source of labor and whether it has enough military manpower. To solve that, Chinese authorities have promised monetary bonus, longer maternity and honeymoon leaves for new families. A Chinese political advisor said earlier this year that he plans to propose lowering China's marriage age to 18, down from 22 for men and 20 for women. Even China's version of TikTok is echoing the call. A growing amount of content about reproduction is being pushed on the platform. But will these stimulus measures encourage baby fever inside China?
People in China are under such huge pressure. Life is hard, the economy is bad, unemployment is high, people are struggling just to get by. In times like this, when the future feels uncertain and people are afraid to spend money, they don't even dare to get married. And if they do get married, they're too scared to have kids. Because their own lives are already so tough, they don't want their children to have an even harder one. They just can't see any hope. Governments at all levels are short on money right now. So when a policy is made, but there are no concrete support measures behind it, meaning even if there were funds, it still might not solve the problem.
At the same time, China's woes aren't limited to parental ones. Videos posted on social media reveal once bustling streets across China are now empty as street vendors struggle to make a living.
Places like Huashan Road and Huaihai Road used to be packed with people, but now there are far fewer. Meanwhile, businesses like crematoriums, funeral homes, grave manufacturers, and coffin makers are doing really well.
Many people died inside China after the COVID-19 pandemic caused by the Chinese Communist Party virus ravaged the country. Births continue to fall at the same time. A figure worth noting, several major cell phone carriers in China reported a loss of at least 21 million customers at the beginning of 2020. Many believe that number is still far below the true death toll. That's in part because the Chinese regime does not classify deaths caused by COVID-19 the same way other countries do. According to our own research and calculations, based on leaked documents and eyewitness accounts, over 100 million people died in China during the COVID-19 pandemic. Check the description box down below to watch our exclusive report on this topic. That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.